So I so funny that you're messaging on the group and it's all the same people that are right here. They can actually just talk.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to all our lovely viewers. On behalf of the organizing team and Al Mahdi Madrasa, I am so delighted to welcome you all to debate number 2 in our Speak Out debate series. So debate is an art, and many of us within our Wessex family have risen up to the challenge. The aim of this project is to foster a long-term vision to develop and perfect the art of skillful speech and debate. And what better way to build this life skill than to debate the relevant topics in the safe space of Al Mahdi Madrasa. Alhamdulillah, the previous debate was very well received, and the overwhelmingly positive response has really set the tone for this project. So thank you one and all for tuning in and supporting the cause. And we have much in store for you today. The motion of today's debate: this house believes that the mother tongue has no future. We hope to make this debate an interactive one, and we want to hear from you. So join the conversation, tell us what you think of the motion, and vote on it. Join us on slido.com with the code 379748, should be on your screens, and make sure you put your vote in before we close the poll. Please refer to the communication that we sent out via the emails on how to use Slido. We will keep coming back to it, so keep it open. There you will notice we have a little tab. We have a Q&A section there where we'll encourage you to post your questions and comments to the speakers throughout the debate. For technical help, please do not contact the moderators, i.e. myself and Sajida Bai, as we will be unable to respond to you at the time. But for the Wessex members, please contact Brother Abbas Huda or Sister Alia Nur Muhammad. And just to reiterate, that is for technical help with Slido only. So before we begin, I'd like to invite Zahra and Zainab Karmali, 2 of our madrasa students, to commence the event with a recitation from the Holy Quran.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أرأيت الذي يكذب بالدين فذلك الذي يدعو اليتيم ولا يحض على طعام المسكين فويل للمصلين الذين هم عن صلاتهم ساهون الذين هم يراءون ويمنعون الماعون In the name of Allah, the most beneficent and most merciful. Have you seen him who denied the final judgment? That is the one who treats the orphans harshly and does not urge others to feed the poor. So woe to the praying ones who unmindful and their prayers, who do good to be seen and refuse to give even the simplest aid.
صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. Thank you so much for that sweet recitation, Zahra and Zainab. Jazakumullah khair. We are truly lucky to have such fantastic budding speakers and reciters at Al Mahdi Madrasa. And inshallah, maybe Zahra and Zainab, you'll be joining us on the debating panel sometime soon in a few years. To the audience, please, can I remind you all to vote for poll number 1 on the motion on slido.com if you haven't already done so. It will be closing soon, so quick, enter the code, that's 379748. You can also post your questions and comments during the debate. We'll try and address these during the free-for-all segment. So, getting to the fun part now. Today's debate will be moderated again by Sister Sajida Jafar, who needs no introduction. I think we all just saw how awesome she was last time. So I'm going to move on to the proposing team. The proposing team will commence their argument with Sister Fatima Hamir, who was born and raised in Tanzania, but is a true gem of Wessex Jamaat. Fatima Bai studied pharmacy in the UK and met her match, and only Fatima Bai can handle the unique personality that is her husband. She's a pharmacist by profession, but has always loved teaching and education, which is very evident in her role as a madrasa teacher and her passion for nurturing the little angels of Wessex Jamaat, including her 2 beautiful daughters. I should warn the other team, though, Fatima Bai is a warrior of research, so look out for her. Coming in second with the second argument is Sister Zainab Al-Kadmi. For those of you who know Zainab, that name may have become synonymous with the words extroverted and cheeky. So whilst she is Iraqi by blood, you will find Zainab downing a bowl of ash, the signature Iranian soup at Wessex, or striking up a conversation with an auntie in Gujarati. So it's no surprise that Zainab said yes to the debate, but given the cheekiness of the recently qualified optometrist, the opposers should probably keep an eye out for her. And yes, that was a pun intended. Next up, from the proposers is Brother Sajjad Jafar, who grew up in Wessex and moved to London for uni. Whilst his degree is in material science and engineering, Sajjad Ba is passionate about education and also tutors in maths and sciences. Sajjad Ba teaches in London but has not forgotten his roots and regularly returns home to Portsmouth. Speaking of roots, his family are convinced that he uses his funky hair to demonstrate the laws of physics, or dare I say, refute them. And I am also sure that Sajjad Ba will be refuting so much more than the laws of physics in this evening's debate. And finally, the closing speaker of the proposing team is Brother Muhammad Abbas Jafar, who is a GP working in Havant, the Secretary of the Jamaat, and a madrasa teacher. So whilst he has never taken part in any formal debates, Muhammad Abbas Ba has had some experiences with public speaking, having won the Rotary Club Youth Speaks competition, not once, not twice, but 3 times, and not to mention regularly delivering the announcement within Wessex Jamaat. Is there anything that the All-Star of Wessex cannot do? Well, today we put the Rotary Club champion to the test. Let's hear more about the opponents.
Thank you, Khadija. So let's move on to the opposing team of Brother Musaddiq Damji, Sister Safa, Brother Muhammad Taki, and Sister Zahra. So Brother Musaddiq Damji will give the opposing team's opening statement. Musaddiq is a community pharmacist by profession, indeed a rare species in the Khoja world. He values his position as the first point of contact in the community for health-related matters. Musaddiq grew up being part of the Scouts Club in Dar es Salaam and took an active role in volunteering, and now is a proud member of the Wessex Volunteers Group. His loves, apart from his beautiful wife, include heights, food, and cricket. Given the match tonight, good thing it's cricket and not football, huh, Musaddiq? Now, we move on to Sister Safa Waltham Sharafi, who will take the baton as speaker 2. Safa was born in Poole, Dorset, one of the most picturesque places in the UK. She has a bachelor's degree in Arabic and Persian from SOAS, University of London, and speaks English, Farsi, Moroccan, and Arabic. And inshallah soon we'll add Gujarati and Swahili to your repertoire. Safa loves all things crafty and has created some amazing resources for our madrasa children. Safa's claim to fame is that she is Auntie Nilofer's daughter. For those of you who don't know, Auntie Nilofer is somewhat a local celebrity here. And we are sure, Safa, that one day you will inshallah be named as the claim to fame by your 3 lovely children. Now, for the single girls tuning in today, we have an eligible bachelor on the panel. From gloomy Peterborough to the dunes of Dubai and now residing in Wessex, our third speaker, Brother Muhammad Taqi Huda, is no stranger to different cultures and backgrounds. He recently graduated with a master's degree in biomedical engineering and currently works in a tech startup. Muhammad Taqi enjoys volunteering in the community and keeping active through various sports. He can now, inshallah, add debating to his expanding portfolio. That's a pretty glowing Rishta profile, huh? And last but definitely not least is Sister Zahra Ismail, who will conclude her team's arguments. Zahra is also a beloved daughter of this Jamaat. Zahra has always enjoyed public speaking and spoken word poetry and has taken part in various Rotary Club Youth Speaks and other speaking events over the years. Now, Zahra, I'm not sure if you've come up against your brother at the Rotary Club events, but I'm intrigued by what today will bring, as the 2 of you will go head to head. Zahra is also a mother to 2 under 2s. Her youngest is only 2 months old, and despite her children's tender ages, Zahra is here tonight. I think that is the very definition of a super mom.
Thank you so much for that. Welcome to all our participants. We are thankful to the judges for their encouragement and support from the onset, for taking time out of their busy schedules, and for the fervor and zeal with which they have approached this challenge. We have Uncle Shabir Walji, Auntie Sabir Adori, and Brother Amir Nasser, so we'll learn more about them later. In keeping with the format of debate 1, the judges will make the final decision regarding the winning team, as they have a strict points-based criteria to adhere to. However, we do want to get a feel for the audience's views using the slider polls, and the best speaker from both teams will be decided by you, the audience. And I am just closing the poll now.
Thank you, Khadija. So we'll just wait for the results. A lot of suspense coming out here.
My apologies. Here we go.
Okay, so 85% of the audience voted in opposition of the motion. So does the mother tongue have a future? According to the audience, yes, it does. So with that in mind, let's move on to the main event, the debate that you've all been anticipating, and we'll see if the other team can sway you over to their side. So the proposing team are arguing in favor of the motion. This house believes that the mother tongue has no future, and the opposing team are arguing against the motion. As was the same for debate 1, which was there can be no Western Muslim identity, the moderators have selected which participants are on the opposing and proposing teams, so they do not get a choice in the matter. Thus, it's even more important to stress that the arguments being presented are for the sake of the debate only and do not necessarily represent the views of those raising them. The speakers on the proposing and opposing teams will follow the speaker's order and will alternate between the 2 teams. The first speakers, beginning with the proposing team, will give their opening statements and outline their arguments. The second speakers on each team will then come forward, expand on their team's arguments, and can use the opportunity to refute the other team. The third speakers will then have their turns to speak and refute. Each speaker is allowed 5 minutes. Sister Khadija is our timekeeper, and she'll announce the time elapsed at 4 minutes, and an alarm will ring at 5. The teams will be penalized for going over the 5 minutes or not using the allocated time adequately, and this will be taken into consideration by the judges. After the first 3 speakers from each team have spoken, this is the exciting free-for-all round where Sister Khadija will fire questions at each team with some questions selected from the audience. So I hope you've got your Slido page open. Please go to slido.com and use the code 379748 to post questions for participants and add comments. And we will keep referring to Slido throughout. After the free-for-all round, we'll come back and speaker 4 from each team will be given 5 minutes to make the closing arguments for their teams. Once the debate ends, the judges will discuss their findings according to their strict judging criteria, which centers on style, content, and strategy. And we have some exciting guest speakers whilst we await the judges' verdict. So we're looking forward to some interactive audience participation further down the line. Once again, before we begin, I'd like to stress that the arguments being presented today are for the sake of the debate and do not necessarily represent the views of those raising them. And it is the moderators, not the participants, who have chosen the teams. So, this house believes that the mother tongue has no future. I would like to invite Sister Fatima Hamir to make the opening statement for the proposing team.
Fatima Bai, if you're ready, your time starts now.
My dear brothers and sisters, respected elders, from the proposing side of the house today, I'd like to welcome you all by saying Salaam alaikum, Kemcho, Shikamo, Hola, Bonjour. It all sounds so pleasant and resonates with each and every one of us. But the reality is, and the statistics confirm, that of the world's estimated 6,000 to 7,000 languages, one language dies every 14 days. And our mother tongue is no exception to this. It is called linguistic imperialism, the transfer of a dominant language to other people due to preference and relevance. And this is a reality that has to be accepted. The mother tongue has no future. It sounds harsh, I don't deny that, but don't write me off just yet. Before I can convince you all to set aside your emotions and agree objectively that our house is right, let us first define some important terms. Let me ask you a question. Would the mother tongue of an adopted child be the ethnic language of his biological parent or the language spoken by his adopted parents? Would the mother tongue of a child to an Indian parent in the West be the parent's ethnic language or the language of the land? So although the most renowned dictionaries all define mother tongue simply as the language a person has grown up speaking, its definition varies between individuals. To define the language we speak, learn, and feel comfortable with, the term dominant language is more appropriate. To set the grounds for this debate, the implicit definition of the mother tongue in this motion is the language that pertains to one's ethnicity, culture, and lineage. This is not to be confused with one's dominant language. So now that we have clarified that, let's revisit the motion. The motion says the mother tongue has no future. It doesn't say the mother tongue should have no future. What's the difference between has and should, you ask? Should argues a future for the mother tongue based on subjective and personal viewpoints, hence the discussion of its value. I'd love to be able to converse with my children fluently in Kutchi, for them to be able to speak to their grandparents in Kutchi, but that is not what the motion says. The motion eliminates the emotion by the use of the word has, which determines the objective trajectory of the mother tongue, considering the way we're moving forward. The word has argues the future of the mother tongue based purely on empirical and circumstantial observation that allows you to predict its course. And finally, when we say that it has no future, we're not defining future as a set point in time, 1 second, 10 years, 100 years down the line. No, we're referring to its sustainability for future generations. Is the mother tongue a self-sustaining language? Just compare your dad's, yours, and your child's Gujarati, and you'll get your answer. It's as simple as that. I'd like to leave you with a question worth pondering. Do you identify yourself first as an Indian or Iraqi or Afghani or as a Muslim? Because whilst our culture may be tied to the mother tongue, our identity as Muslims, which by the way should take priority, is not. In a global village like ours, where social media, the internet, and peers so heavily influence value transmission, we must opt for a superstructure of values that transcend language boundaries, which is the essence of our religion. Shouldn't it be our actions that embody our identity and unify us, especially as Muslims? Allah says in the Quran, "We sent not a messenger except with the language of his people." At face value, this verse may seem to support my opposition, which they might use, when in fact it actually proves our point, that the principles of Islam surpass the test of time because it embodies this superstructure of values that wasn't tied to the mother tongue of the prophet of that time, which is bound to change. The Quran says, "Indeed, in the messenger of Allah, you have an excellent example of conduct." Our prophets were the embodiment of Islamic principles. It was their actions, not their mother tongue, that gives us our Muslim identity today. Dear brothers and sisters, surely now you agree with us when we say there are other more powerful forces at play here that we must account for in ensuring our beliefs and principles don't fade with time. And the mother tongue is not the way to do this because it has no future. Matrubhasha nukoi bhavishyanati. Youngsters, good luck figuring that out. Thank you.
Thank you, Sister Fatima. A lot to take in there. So in essence, not getting mixed up with our emotions, but based on empirical evidence, the objective reality is that our mother tongue has no future. The term is known as linguistic imperialism. And what we should aim for is a superstructure of values as Muslims first that is not tied to any language, because it's the values that transcend time and speak volumes about your identity. Thank you, Sister Fatima. Next, can I please invite Sister Zainab Al-Kadhimi as speaker two to give your thoughts from the opposing team.
Zainab, when you're ready, your time starts now.
You guys mean from the opposing team?
So that would be Mothertongue Damji.
Mothertongue Damji.
Oh, sorry, my bad. I was looking at the wrong list.
Yes,
Apologies,
I
my bad.
apologize. Brother Mossadegh Damji,
Right,
please
sorry,
come forward.
Mossadegh. Sorry, my bad. Let's do this again. Mossadegh, your time starts now.
Assalamu alaikum, my dear brothers and sisters, dear judges, and the entire audience today. Thank you all for taking out some time from your busy schedules to be with us today. Now, I'd like to thank my honorable opponent for their opening statement. My task as the first speaker is to clearly define the motion. And look at how I'm saying I need to clearly define the motion, because the proposers haven't even defined the term mother tongue. I'd like to point out to my opponents and to our esteemed audience today as to what the motion isn't today. Today's motion isn't in any way focused on any particular language like Gujarati or Kutchi or Farsi or Arabic. Those are the four that were mentioned quite a lot in the first, in the opening argument, or any other language for that matter. And neither is it focused on any particular place or geographical location. There was a lot of mention of our mother tongue. The motion doesn't say our mother tongue, it says the mother tongue. So let me start off and clear a few things up, and let's dissect this motion in complete depth. According to the Oxford Dictionary, the mother tongue is the language which a person has grown up speaking from early childhood. If that's not enough, let's look at what the Cambridge Dictionary defines the mother tongue as. The mother tongue is the first language that you learn as a baby rather than a language learned at school or as an adult. Now, the opposition is presenting the mother tongue as if it is a language of our parents or our ancestors. And you can understand why. The phrase mother tongue is very misleading. It's a misnomer. Just to clarify what I mean by this, I'll give you an example of a very common misnomer. Morning sickness. Now, looking at the words, you would assume it is a sickness that happens in the morning. However, as the many mothers and medics in the audience and the opposition would attest to, this is definitely not the case. Any sickness due to pregnancy, regardless of the time of the day, is called morning sickness. So now, how does this relate to our discussion? A mother tongue is the first language a child learns, irrespective of the language of the mother. Just like morning sickness is called that, irrespective of the timing of the sickness. This means for a Khoja raised on English as their first language, English is their mother tongue, not Gujarati. For an Iranian raised speaking Chinese, Chinese is their mother tongue, not Farsi. Now, is the proposition then arguing that languages such as English and Chinese have no future? Doesn't make any sense to me. Anyways, note that the motion states the mother tongue, and I emphasize it says the mother tongue, not our mother tongue or the mother tongue of any specific people, which means it's talking about the concept of the mother tongue as a whole. This also means that we cannot limit this discussion to the value of our ancestral languages to the second and third generation communities living in the West. That is not what the motion says. The motion is extremely broad. Now, according to Ethnologue, a leading research center in Texas, today there is a total of 7,139 different languages spoken in the world, not just one or two, 7,000 languages, and all of them are someone's mother tongue. These languages have existed for generations, and they will be around for generations to come. So where does this leave us? What are we actually debating about today? As all languages are someone's mother tongues, what the discussion boils down to is the future of language itself. Language, which by many philosophers such as Chomsky, is considered one of the things which defines us as humans. Language which is so vital to every part of our life. Language which governs everything from how we think to how we interact with others. To argue that language itself has no future is just absurd. But that is what the motion is saying when you look at it carefully. That being said, there is a case to be made for the value and future of the mother tongue. For those who have one mother tongue and then learn a different language, for example, a child who learns Gujarati and then learns English, and inshallah, we will explore that. However, this is one small specific example, and we cannot rule this motion based on this. So where do we go from here? Inshallah, Sister Safa, who will be our second speaker, will continue to prove to you that the mother tongue has a future by exploring language through religious and cultural angles. And this will be followed by Brother Muhammad Taqi, who will delve deeper into the topic with a more scientific lens into it. Finally, after the questions are done, you will hear from Sister Zahra, who will summarize the debate, leaving you with no doubt that the mother tongue indeed does have a future. And before I finish, I'll just leave you all with a single statement. We are arguing whether the mother tongue has a future or not. The truth of the matter is that there is no future without the mother tongue. Wassalam. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brother Musaddiq. So, defining the motion, what is the mother tongue? It's according to the definitions that you've provided, the first language you learn as a baby, irrespective of the language of the mother. I like the example, interesting one, of an Iranian child growing up speaking Chinese. And the way that you put it across is that it's the future of language itself that defines us as humans. And there is actually no future without a mother tongue. Just as a side note, I hope you never suffer from morning sickness. Now, I will now invite Sister Zainab Al-Kadimi from the proposing team to give us your thoughts.
Zainab, for reals this time, your time starts now.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. I'd like to thank my esteemed opponent, Damji, for his opening speech and almost proving our point. Whilst I like Damji's attempt to the definition, Sister Fatima Hamir also presented a clear definition using the term the and not our. Also, I think morning sickness usually occurs in the morning. Our esteemed opposition has raised a proposition that our mother tongue might be fluid. changing from generation to generation such that we might consider English as our mother tongue. However, I'd like each of you to reflect on how you understood the word mother tongue when you first read the motion for today's debate. You may have thought of Gujarati, Kutchi, Arabic, Farsi, Swahili, Urdu, or any other language, but I challenge anyone from a non-English background to say that their first thought was that the mother tongue referred to English. One example to illustrate this is when people ask you where you come from. You know that the minute you say, I'm from Portsmouth, you're faced with the question, where are you really from? It's the same thing with the term mother tongue. If, as an Iraqi, if I was asked what my mother tongue was and I said English, it would be considered a wholly unsatisfactory response, because that's not what we mean when we use the term mother tongue. Unlike the term dominant language, as Damji also mentioned, mother tongue implies an understanding that is rooted within our heritage. Common sense therefore dictates that we must adopt what would be considered the lay understanding of this term for the debate. But let's say, for argument's sake, that English was your mother tongue. To state that because English has a future, all mother tongues have a future would be a logical fallacy. The same cannot be said for all mother tongues, and therefore this argument fails. English does not have a future because it's a mother tongue, but there are other aspects that determine the language of our future, which I'll discuss shortly. As I mentioned earlier, the mother tongue is intrinsically linked to the past. The word mother tongue by nature is rooted in the past and refers to heritage and the language of our forefathers, not the language of the future. You see, the language is based on demands that are set in place in society. There is very little demand of the mother tongue in this age and setting. The opposing team may say that the mother tongue is needed to communicate with the older generation, including our grandparents, and obviously we completely agree with this. However, the sad and unfortunate reality is that the elders will die out, and thus with that, the need and the demand to communicate with the elders in the mother tongue will decline. Even today, we're already starting to see a pattern where the youngsters have trouble communicating with the older generation in their mother tongue and causing language barriers. Instead, we need to look at the demands set in place, not only now, but in the future, which dictate our language. These demands include the dominant language and the language of the lay people, the language of trade and business, and the language used as a medium of education. Currently, most schools and universities all over the world globally, not just here, but in Iraq, for example, use English as their main language for education. With all these examples, it's clear to see that there is a higher demand for the English language compared to the mother tongue. This is not to say it will always be English. With China growing as a superpower, it may be that the demand may shift, and so will the language. This can be seen now where more people are learning Mandarin and Cantonese. It's these demands that determine the language of the future, and all this falls under the notion of language imperialism. As mentioned before, language imperialism is defined as the transfer of the dominant language to other people. It's basically a unilateral imposition that occurs due to imperialism. Now, as an Arabic speaker myself, you may think that I would be totally against this motion. How can I be saying that my mother tongue is declining when all the hadiths and the Quran is in Arabic? The Arabic language will continue as a language of the Quran and will hold so much importance for Muslims in Islam, but it must be understood that the reason for preserving it is not due to the mother tongue, but it's due to its utility. On the other hand, the Arabic language spoken differs from the religious element. Whilst I read and understand Arabic text from the Quran, there are still elements where I need to use the English translation for the understanding. This is because the Arabic language that is spoken is completely different to the Arabic of the Quran, and that's because the language is evolving. Even Fusha Arabic, for example, is declining, and it's abnormal to see someone speak it as part of a natural, normal conversation. Similarly, we can look at the English language, where it has evolved. Compare Chaucer English to the modern day English. You aren't going to find someone that speaks Chaucer English, and even if they do, you wouldn't understand it. Let me end with this example from the Canterbury Tales prologue, line 1. One that April with his shores soaked, the drought of March hath said to the rote. I mean, I don't understand that. Do you? Like the example of the Chaucer English, the mother tongue will always be on a downward trajectory, and therefore we can have no long-term future.
Thank you, Sister Zainab. I wasn't expecting to hear any Chaucer today, but it threw in something a bit different to think about, definitely. So the argument again is in regards to language imperialism and taking a common sense approach to the motion. And really, the future of a mother tongue, any language that is spoken, will depend on the demands for society, and things to take into consideration are the dominant language, the language spoken in that location, learning for education reasons or for business. Is the language of the future going to be Mandarin or Cantonese? And giving an example that Arabic will always prevail as the language of the Quran, because that is the demand put upon it, but it might be a different case with spoken Arabic. Thank you so much, Zainab. I would now like to invite Sister Safa Waltham Sharafi to give us your team's arguments, please.
And your time starts now.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum. To start with all due respect to my worthy opponent, Zainab, as a mother of three, one of those a twin pregnancy, I can assure that morning sickness happens at all times of the day and night. My esteemed colleague has defined the mother tongue, explaining that based on the definition, the real question is whether language has a future. We're not pinpointing any particular language, whether that be English, Arabic, Chinese, or any other language around the globe. It wasn't defined in the motion, and it's the, not a or our or some other language. I will attempt to present here some cultural and religious proofs for our argument that really can leave no room for doubt in this debate that the mother tongue does have a future. Firstly, culture and language are intrinsically joined together in a symbiotic relationship, each feeding into the other. As Noam Chomsky said, a language is not just words, it's a culture, a tradition, a unification of a community, a whole history that creates what a community is. It's all embodied in a language. No matter where one is from, their mother tongue, irrespective of what that language may be, is pivotal for that person's culture and identity. It can also be said that culture strengthens language and preserves it. One does not need look much further than one's own doorstep for proof of the future of the mother tongue. As of 2019, there were 149 different languages spoken in Southampton schools. Each of these is someone's mother tongue. And there are numerous community language classes run throughout the city for those who wish to maintain a mother tongue along with its culture, which is other than English, in addition to various cultural organizations and community groups. In our own community, we have examples of this. The Al-Zahra Association, while offering bilingual programs, is primarily aimed at Farsi-speaking members who wish to maintain their cultural and religious practices in Farsi. In our own mosque, we still have readings and matins in Urdu. Thus, these religious and cultural practices are sustaining languages in the community and vice versa. And even Ayatollah Sistani has more than once advised taking great care to ensure the preservation of cultural identity through, amongst other things, language. Additionally, I'd like to take the country of Morocco as an example. There are 3 state languages recognized in Morocco: Arabic, French, and Tamazight or Berber. There are communities in Morocco that do not speak Arabic or French. Their mother tongue, Tamazight, has been around for millennia and has survived the arrival of Arabic with Islam, the influence of Judaism that came from those fleeing the Reconquista in Spain, and finally the French occupation. This language is enriched with its own culture, including literature, art, clothing, food, architecture, and much more. And it's a great source of pride and only enhances the cultural heritage of Morocco. This can similarly be applied to Arabic, and those who have been brought up with all 3 languages, which are many, have basically won the jackpot of being able to understand different cultures and societies. This is a vivid example of the glowing future of a mother tongue that has connections to the culture. While highly relevant, the arguments I have thus made pale into insignificance when compared to what Allah has revealed to us in the Quran. The Quran has many verses on language. To say the mother tongue is to say language, and language is the sole domain of human beings. Its origin is divine, and ultimately its use is to praise Allah. Surah Rahman, verse 1-4 states, "Most gracious, it is He who taught the Quran. He has created man. He has taught him speech." So language is one of Allah's signs and a mercy to us. And therefore, how can we question its strength, importance, or its future? Al-Hujurat, verse 13 states, "O mankind, we created you from a single pair of a male and a female, and made you into nations and tribes that ye may know each other." Ar-Rum 22 says, Among his signs is the creation of the heavens and the earth and the variations in your languages and your colors. Verily, in that are signs for that who know. And Al-Hud says in 118, if thy Lord has so willed, he could have made mankind one people. This shows that the Quran invites people to study and respect diversity. Allah entreats us to know each other, and diverse languages have been given to us in order to do this. Thus, language will always be needed. Taken together, these testify that it is of Allah's signs that mankind is made up of many peoples, cultures, and languages, and that indeed it is His will that by virtue of languages we communicate with and get to know one another, and thus language will be preserved. And so, pursuant to the definition of the mother tongue, to say that mother tongue has no future is to say that language has no future. However, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has vouchsafed language for humanity. Therefore, the motion must be opposed. Mother tongue does have a future.
Thank you very much, Sister Safa. So presenting your argument from the interpretation of the motion that language, saying the mother tongue has no future, is essentially saying that language has no future. Yet the origin of language is divine, and it is a sign and mercy to us from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Therefore, it will always be needed. And you gave the example of the country of Morocco that has withheld external influences. And because of the preservation of the language Tamasir, if I have said it correctly, that actually has enhanced their cultural heritage. And in there is an example for everybody. So now we are moving on to the third speaker. So I would like to invite Brother Sajjad Jafar, please, to give his team's statements.
Sajjad Bhai, your time starts now. You're muted.
Sorry, my mistake.
1 second, let me reset the timer because, technical difficulties in the Zoom era. Okay, and time starts now.
My oldest brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum. I'd like to thank our esteemed opposition for presenting their arguments, and they are very, very good. But a couple of points that have come up from Damji, first of all, talking about the fact there are 7,000 languages right now, but languages die and languages restart over time. So the languages from 10 years ago, or from 100,000 years ago, would not be the same as the languages now. And from Sister Safa bring in the link between language and culture, which there is evidence for, but if that was the case, we would all be Hindu right now if we were following our Hindu origin. Now, for me today, or what you've heard from my teammates regarding the loss of the native language, also known as language attrition, which occurs over time due to the increasing usage of the dominant language with regards to the likes of education and business. What I will be presenting today is the sustainability of the mother tongue that we see within our community here in West Extremadura. Sister Fatima previously mentioned that language becomes extinct every 2 weeks, and linguists have outlined 3 stages that occur for a language to die. First, a language is considered vulnerable when children only speak their mother tongue at home or in the company of relatives. Secondly, a language is endangered when children no longer study it. And finally, a language is considered critically endangered when the youngest people who can speak it are grandparents. Now, I will link these points into my argument by providing a few of my experiences and also the background of our Jamaat. Some of you may know that I'm a reciter of English, Marthia, Martam, and Nasheeds. What you may not know is the reason why I started doing this. Partly it's because I did not understand the recitations in other languages, but also, and probably more importantly, it was because on observing the youth and some adults in our mosque and in other mosques, many would switch off during these non-English recitations. They would leave the room and start using their phones, and they would then return when the English lectures began. This shows the language for many of the youth is past the stage of being vulnerable because the mother tongue is now not understood. And there is a chasm of difference that is noted when all people within the space can understand the content being recited and can thereby engage with it. This is the crux of the community we have grown up with in Wessex. The history of our Jamaat is that we were founded in 1982 by a group of Khoja Shia Muslims that were attending the university. Originally, the mosque events were the youth watching video recordings that were in Urdu, but on appointment of the resident alim Marhum Mullah Bashir Rahim, the lectures were switched to English to enable the youth to participate and engage. It was recognized from the off that the future of this community living in the UK was to ensure that the message was spread to the youngsters in the language of the land, aka their dominant language. If we simply relied on our mother tongue, our community would have collapsed and a large proportion of our youth would have lost a connection with the religion. It is no surprise that when any event takes place now, the Quran, du'as, the recitations are provided with an English translation. Our madrasas teach us about our religion using the language of the land. Our lessons on fiqh, history, and akhlaq are all delivered to us in English. We do not hold lessons on Gujarati, Urdu, or Farsi in the center, which comes back to the point that a language becomes endangered when the children no longer study it. Using the dominant language has also enabled the multicultural element of our community and the bringing together of a variety of different cultures. In this debate today, we have people whose mother tongues all differ, but are brought together by their dominant language. It is not sustainable to hold this debate today in a mother tongue due to the fact that all these languages differ. A multicultural community in turn also leads to people from different cultures, marriages of people from different cultures with different mother tongues. When it comes to teaching their children, which mother tongue is prioritized? What is generally found is an amalgamation of the different languages that are passed down, leading to a loss of the mother tongue in its purity. But what is always prioritized instead is a focus on the future with the dominant language. As this keeps happening, the languages in themselves become critically endangered, as eventually, over time, the only people that speak the mother tongue are the grandparents. We have already specified that when we refer to the future of the mother tongue, we are not referring to an arbitrary point in time, but a general trend and the trajectory that each language follows. In conclusion, Wessex Jamaat may be a small community, but represents a microcosm of the communities around not only the UK, but also worldwide. As each generation comes through and the rise in multiculturalism takes place, we can see that the rise of the dominant language is continuously reinforced, whereas the sustainability of the mother tongue will collapse as it eventually moves from vulnerable to endangerment to extinction. Thank you for listening. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Brother Sajjad. So, to look at the general trend and trajectory that the mother tongue is taking, and referring to the mother tongue by the definition you guys had set out, and not the dominant language. So, regarding linguistic imperialism, there are 3 stages to a language dying out. Number 1, it's classed as vulnerable when the language is only spoken at home. Number 2, it's endangered when it's no longer studied by children. And number 3, it's on the verge of extinction when the youngest people speaking it are grandparents. You made the references to Azadari being in English to ensure that the message of Islam is not lost. And also a reference to Wessex Jamaat, a microcosm of different communities and people from different backgrounds that are actually brought together by the dominant language to also sustain those bonds of brothership, but to sustain the faith. Thank you, Sajjad. And finally, Brother Muhammad Taqi, please provide us with the final arguments representing the opposing team's position.
And your time starts now.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Following the points that my respected opposition speaker mentioned, I'd like to clarify a few things. Firstly, you said if we simply relied on our mother tongue. Again, that's not the motion of this debate. The motion of this debate is the mother tongue, and if it has a future. Again, you said new languages come and go. However, each language will be the mother tongue of a group of people. And the 7,000 languages that are currently in the world today, that is actually a recent find within the past few years. Also, regarding our origins, I haven't heard or found us ever being Hindus before we actually converted to Shia Ithna-Ashris. So I'd now like to start by going through the main reasons why the mother tongue has a future, backed up by scientific research. So firstly, what is language? Language itself is a medium of spoken, manual, or written communication by which humans can express themselves to one another. It is also a requirement for communication between our families, friends, and society as a whole. The development of the mother tongue is related to the quality of relationships within the family unit. It is also important in some areas, such as phonological awareness, which is basically recognizing the sounds within language, as skills acquired in one language support the acquisition of skills in another language. There are many studies to show that maintaining the mother tongue can provide a great foundation to learn and get exposure to other languages. Scientific research has shown that being bilingual improves cognitive and sensory processing, allowing better interpretation of information through the brain. It increases efficiency of the brain from early childhood to old age. Throughout childhood, findings have demonstrated that the advantages of bilingualism to the executive control of the brain, which are the functions that allow us to carry out complex tasks, from problem solving to planning multiple activities and focusing our attention on a specific goal. In fact, bilingual children show significant advantages over monolingual children in terms of their general cognitive level. Studies have also shown that the brain has great flexibility throughout its lifespan. Different regions of the brain in both the right and left hemispheres work together to support particular language functions. Multiple languages can coexist in the brain, where one language even activates the other when only one is in use. Research has also found, in both early and current times, that the acquisition of the mother tongue and a majority language has brought positive linguistic, cognitive, and academic outcomes, which have positively impacted multilingual children and adults. So as we heard earlier, there are over 7,000 languages spoken in the world today. Of those, the most widely spoken is English, followed by Mandarin, each being spoken by over 1 billion people. As we are currently in the UK, the results from the last census indicate that English is the mother tongue of 92% of residents, as well as possibly the majority of the panelists on this debate. The remaining 8% who had a different mother tongue could speak English well or very well. Which then brings about the question as to why learn language. Well, as we live in a globalized world with people from various countries and backgrounds, it allows us to communicate and connect with people in their own language from various cultures. There are great financial benefits of learning language, as it can be an investment in oneself. Being multilingual can improve employability, foster stronger relationships in business and between co-workers. If the mother tongue is of a linguistic minority, there are significant benefits of learning other language used for international communication, providing greater opportunities, jobs, etc. Now you might be questioning why I'm stressing on the importance of learning language. Well, it's very clear. Understanding that language provides many benefits as well as greater socio-economic benefit. However, it is only when the mother tongue is maintained can you then reap the benefits of bilingualism or multilingualism by learning other languages, as you wouldn't get these benefits by losing the mother tongue. Therefore, it is only by keeping the mother tongue, which allows us to better grasp other languages due to the strong foundation that we have in our own mother tongue, whatever language that may be, which only then proves the point that the mother tongue will always have a future, as it is the foundation of any sort of communication within our society. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brother Muhammad Taki. So our language is the foundation of any communication, and language is a medium of communication for expression. It enhances the quality of relationships within family units. But apart from that, you touched on the advantages of bilingualism or multilingualism, and that is, advantages linguistically, cognitively, academically, and then you've touched on financial benefits and socioeconomic benefits as well. But it has to be an investment in oneself, and you can only reap those benefits by maintaining the mother tongue. Thank you, Brother Muhammad Taki. We've almost come to the end of this segment. We're approaching the free-for-all round, so I would request that you do enter any comments or questions, especially questions you have for the teams on slido.com using the code 379748. Before we move on, Brother Sajjad Jafar mentioned, a great pioneer of our community, Mullah Bashir Rahim. And, for myself, for Sajjad, my other siblings, and so many of us, he meant so much to us as a role model and really, a grandfather to us, a parent of this community. And I would like to request a Surah Fatiha for him, please, and all marhumin. Now, all of you at home, I would like you to join me in a really loud virtual recitation of salawat for the participants. I think we've heard some fantastic arguments and I'm looking forward to what's coming up next. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil.
And with that, ladies and go on.
No, I was just going to pass the baton on to you, Sister Khadija.
It looks like I already snatched it. Okay, so with that, ladies and gentlemen, we've now arrived at the free-for-all segment. So please keep your questions and comments coming. We'd love to hear from you. I would like to begin by a point that was raised by Zainab in the proposing team. Zainab talked about Arabic. Why is it being maintained, or why will it be maintained? Because of its utility. Zainab also talked about how Chinese is potentially might become, the dominant language because of the financial growth that's taking place. So here's the question, and I'm posing this first to the proposers. Are we promoting power over identity? And should we ignore the rich culture that the mother tongue presents? Anyone at all from the proposing team? Please let me know at any point if you'd like me to reiterate the question. Fatima, bye.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. First of all, Sister Khadija, thank you for using the word dominant language, which is what we're trying to bring across as opposed to the implied meaning of mother tongue. To actually answer your question with relation to, the dominance of culture, and whether we're giving, we're letting the culture slide with language. Let me give you an example from actually personal experience that will, allow you to understand this better. I was speaking to my dad the other day, and he was on the table, and I was virtually on the phone. And we were discussing this topic actually, and he looks at the table and there is a ramfur and sitafur. I don't know if you know these fruits, but they're in Tanzania. And he tells me, look at how rich our language is. Sitafur is named after the goddess Sita, and ramfur after the Lord Ram. Look at how much we have got from our ethnic language. And I told him, I really don't see the point, because just by saying this, you have brought these Hindu deities onto the table. Wouldn't I rather propagate the Islamic culture to my children, which, by the way, is not tied to the mother tongue? Yeah. So are we giving precedence then to our identity as Muslims, or are we then tied, in an attempt to hang on to our ethnic mother tongue? We are actually hanging on to cultures which sometimes take over the Islamic preference. So that would be my answer to that question. I hope.
Thank you, Fatima Bai. I do have another question following up from that, but I would like to give the floor to Zahra from the Against team.
Thank you. Sister Fatima, I'm sure we will all agree that we would be the first ones to say, drop the parts of the culture that oppose religion, and no one's denying that. However, the Holy Prophet himself was a testament to the fact that the parts of culture which were good, the parts of culture which aligned with Islamic values, he held on to. For instance, the keeping of the sacred months where there were no war, just as an example, right? There was so many elements of the culture of his time which were not brought down with the Quran, but he enshrined and he kept as a result of the value that was inherent within that culture. So to dismiss all of culture just like that and say that we just need to be thinking about religion is a huge disservice to the value that culture has, and is not an Islamic principle to do, as demonstrated by the Holy Prophet.
Thank you, Zahra. That brings another question to mind. Given that you're saying we should not just, discredit everything, what do you guys think of, say, someone who has been brought up in the UK, and they've learned all about their, for example, let's say Indian or Iranian heritage. Now, we all know that our cultures can have some amazing things to it, but also some baggage. So if I said, what if we just forgot about that baggage we have in our culture took what we have in the Western world and put in some Islamic values. What do you make of that? What does the future look like? Muhammad Abbas, please.
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you, Sister Khadija. It's a really great question, and I think the value of culture is, I certainly wouldn't argue against the value of culture. But when we look at culture, what is culture made up of? Culture, yes, language can be considered part of culture, but really culture is much, much more vast than simply language. And I think us conflating these terms is, doing culture a great disservice, really. I mean, even if we think about language itself and how we use it as a means of communication, we know that the spoken word only constitutes about 7% of the meaning of what we are conveying through communication. And actually, we would see, for example, 38% would be the tone, 55% would be the body language. So the actual spoken word itself is relative, is a part of it, but we can't conflate this with the whole of understanding, or very much the whole of culture. Now, this discussion that we are having today is specifically on the language, and the part of language that we're looking at is specifically mother tongue. So again, these terms are not the same language in mother tongue. We're looking at the mother tongue. And speaking of language generally, my dear opposition mentioned about the idea of retaining parts of our culture that are valuable. Again, so we know that language and culture aren't one and the same. But leaving that aside, let's look at language itself. Does the mother tongue intrinsically in itself contain Islamic values? Or is it a means through which we can exhibit our Islamic values? I would argue that Islam can be delivered through any language, and therefore there is no intrinsic need to maintain the mother tongue in order to propagate our values. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Safa or Zahra? Sorry, yes, Zahra, would you like to go for? Muted.
Apologies. It's possible to convey all of Islamic values in any language. However, what is optimal, and how do we decide what is optimal? One way we can look is to our great scholars. Ayatollah Sistani, as was flagged by Sister Safa, has been put great emphasis on mother tongue languages. And so that's one way we can look at this. But again, coming back to the way in which the Holy Prophet did, and we look at what language itself contains. As you said, it's not all of the way we communicate, but it is a huge chunk. So just to dismiss it as just a small portion is, I think, not very accurate to do. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm loving the rebuttal between the siblings. Sajid.
Yeah, so I would like to ask a question to the opposing team. So regarding values from the culture that is linked to your heritage or your mother tongue, what values from that culture do you feel are aligned and enhance your Islamic values? Safa.
Assalamu alaikum. So, being half British and half Iranian, I can draw on two different cultures, and having actually been equally exposed to both languages, they're both important to me. So Iranian culture is a great example of something that has got rid of things that were contrary to Islam and Islamicized things that could be. If you just look at our Nowruz celebrations, where they may have had wine on the hafseen we have now, honey and vinegar and things like this, where they may have read poetry, we read the Quran. But there are other elements that are pivotal parts of Islam, like hospitality. I will give you a simple example. I went to pick something up from a British couple that I've never met. We mentioned them that were Iranian, and they said that Iranian people are the most hospitable people that they have ever met. And this is something that you will hear again and again and again and again from visitors to Iran. So that is just an example of something that is very positive, that is perfectly in line with our faith, and which is something that is quite you don't find to that extent in other cultures. And I'd just like to remind that Persian culture is one of the most ancient cultures in the world, and our language, which in Iran is their mother tongue, doesn't matter, like we said, irrespective of geographical location. So we're not talking about Farsi because I'm here as my mother tongue. No, Farsi in Iran is also their mother tongue, and it's still here, it's still surviving, it's still flourishing, and Iran is a very, very artistic, cultural country.
Thank you very much. I don't think the proposing team does have something to say. Zainab.
Well, firstly, I like the point that was made by Safa. I do know rules as well, and I'm not Iranian, and my Farsi isn't very good at all. But I don't think language has to be a part of the culture element. Like, your culture and the way you are is part of your identity, and I get that language has a part to play, but it shouldn't be such a big thing to do with the culture and the language element. And I think the debate itself focuses on language more than culture. And I think that's what we need to focus on more than culture itself, because we can all keep parts of our culture and traditions, and we adopt culture from other ethnicities, but it doesn't, like, our language doesn't have any involvement in it. That's what I have to say.
Thank you, Zainab. Yeah, so interesting. Without the language, is our culture still our culture? Or without our culture, is our language really, is it born from a culture? Zahra, your hand was up.
Sister Safa can take it.
Safa, go for it. You're muted. We've been doing this for a year. We think we'd learn how to unmute. Safa?
Now it's working. I was muted by somebody else. Okay. To say that culture isn't just language is true, but language carries so much with it. For example, respect is enshrined in language. How you talk in Iran, how you talk probably in languages from Tanzania or from India, probably has much more an element of respect in it than, for example, how people talk in the UK now. You cannot minimize the role of language in a culture, whether it's youth culture here and the role that the youth kind of dialect has and slang has, or whether it's back in Iran and how Persian language and Persian culture or Iranian culture. You cannot minimize it so much. And just quickly going back to what Muhammad Abbas said about language, spoken language being a small portion, that may be correct. There's so much in your body language, but body language will be different depending on what language you speak. The way you move your hands, the intonation of your voice varies depending on what language you speak. So they are intertwined. You cannot remove one from the other. Thank you.
I'll give the floor to Sajjad.
So in terms of what Safa was saying about the fact that language affects kind of your manners, your mannerism, etc. Now, I work in a school, and believe me, there are a number of kids from ethnic backgrounds which speak these other languages that have probably worse akhlaq than some children from white backgrounds. And generally, this is associated more to class rather than culture. The amount of times that I've heard in a playground, now to keep this in a halal saying, "Teri ma," as a joke between people, as a sort of an offensive phrase from, doesn't come from the white kids, that comes from the Asian kids and from their background. Now that is a separation of the fact that it's not your background or your understanding is linked to language in that sense. Yes, there are some kids that have sort of better mannerisms and stuff, but that's, as I mentioned, more associated with class. And the other things we're kind of talking about is the fact that we talk about the Islamic element associated with this, is that you can transfer you're transferring your Islamic Islamic values from child or from parent to child, not through language but through mannerisms and through your actions and your akhlaq more so than your language.
Thank you. Then I wonder why Ayatollah Sistani put such an importance on the mother tongue. But going to Sister Safa.
Yeah, I just wanted to refer back to what Sajjad said about working in a school. I've worked in a primary school as well. I think you have to be careful mixing how children and young people talk between themselves and how they will talk to their elders and in the community. I know from experience, and I have seen children, how they speak amongst themselves, and these may be from Iranian background or Arab background or Afghani background, and between themselves, they can be horrendous and really, really disrespectful. But woe betide them speak to anybody amongst their community like that. So once they're in the community, that culture still pervades and comes through. And it's important to mention that, because I think in any culture, a lot of the times young people use all kind of language between themselves, and that's not something I think particular to anywhere. I think when you need it, that language informs how you speak. You even have different you have like the royal we in Arabic and French and things like that, so that when you speak to elders, you don't just say you. In Farsi, the same thing. You don't just say you have to say shoma, for example. So I think you can't just narrow it down to just things like examples like that.
Thank you for that. I think Muhammad Wasfa has something to refute.
Thank you. I just wanted to firstly actually agree with what my worthy opponents are saying. One of the points he mentioned, I think you may well be right. Iranians are quite possibly the most hospitable people that I know, and that's certainly been my experience. I just wanted to highlight actually that a couple of things. Firstly, that you mentioned about body language also being linked to the language that you speak.
I have to say, I've spoken to many Iranians, Italians, people of various different cultures speaking in English, but with the same zeal and
enthusiasm and body language
as they would
in their own mother tongue.
But the actual point that I really wanted to come onto was that we seem to have been drawn into a bit of a discussion here about culture. And quite understandably, we are all becoming, we're defending our culture and defending the preservation of our culture, because naturally we consider that to be quite an integral part of our identity, with language being a part of that. And I think the points that have been made here are incredibly valid. But I just want to bring us back to what the motion states here. The motion is saying that the mother tongue has no future. So I think, whilst this is a very interesting discussion, we have to take the value judgment out of it here. We're not talking about the value of language, how important it is as culture, how important it is as our identity. Of course, Sayyid Sistani has made this statement. This is, not for people like us to refute. There is clear value in the mother tongue. But though that may be, the sad and unfortunate reality is we have to look at the empirical trajectory of the mother tongue. And, it's clear. This is going in only one direction. If I asked the elders of our community how comfortable they were speaking their mother tongue, they would say, perhaps many of them say they were entirely comfortable speaking the mother tongue. If I asked, let's say, my generation, perhaps it might be a bit more 50-50. If I were to ask the children of our community, how comfortable are you with your mother tongue? If I just stated that question as it was, how comfortable are you with your mother tongue? Then we would see definitively the trajectory of the mother tongue. It's only going in one direction. Sad that though that may be, the mother tongue sadly has no future.
I would like to cut this question here. I'm really sorry, Musaddiqa. There is a question that's coming from the judges. What makes the mother tongue indispensable? Opposers, would you like to take this question first? Zahra. I'll ask you to mute or unmute yourself again. Thank you.
Sorry again. We can take this from two different angles. So first of all, and it ties in to what Muhammad Abbas was saying, is that we do need to go back to the motion, right? And we do need to understand what we mean by the mother tongue, even in this question. So from one angle, the mother tongue being indispensable is telling us that the fact that we have a language that we are taught when we are young, any language, though that may be, is what is so foundational in the way it governs our thoughts, our emotions, our cognitive abilities as we develop. That is completely indispensable. And whichever language that may be that you are taught first, that is hugely important. Because I feel, again, as Muhammad Abbas said, we are getting a bit lost in some of this discussion. We do need to remember that that is what the mother tongue is. But we can also take it from another angle in terms of, specific mother tongues that we might want to discuss, things like Kutchi and Gujarati, Farsi, Swahili even. And I think as Sister Safa mentioned, there are so many different elements of respect, so many different concepts which come out in language which are not available or accessible to us in English, though we go back to it. For some people, English is their mother tongue. So this is just a specific part of the discussion, not the discussion as a whole, because if we go back to the discussion as a whole, all of these languages are mother tongues. But just as an example, this may seem a bit random, but in lots of different cultures and lots of different languages, they have specific terms for things due to they have specific terms which, if you lose the language, you would lose that ability to discern between them. Just as an example, the Himba tribe, I believe it is, has different terms for shades of green that we would find indiscernible, but it jumps out as a difference to them because they have different terms for them. Likewise, distinctions that are made within these cultural languages, such as Dame and Tu in Gujarati or Shoma in Farsi, where we draw distinctions where they do not exist in other languages, it enshrines those distinctions for us. And in this case, this is a distinction of respect, and that is something that is hugely indispensable.
Thank you so much. I think you brought up some very good points there. I would like to change the discussion's direction slightly. These are comments we're receiving from the audience. I'm going to try and integrate a couple, which will take us to the end of this free-for-all round. So, the mother tongue has no bearing to how institutions decide to conduct their programs. Rather, it's how the smallest of institutions, i.e. our home, our family, communicate. So, the mother tongue only has a future if the current generation were to immerse in its heritage, perhaps through family. For example, listening to a majalis once a week doesn't really make a difference to your language. So for those people, the mother tongue is an identity. Does that mean we need to redefine our identity? So my question is, isn't the future built on the past in light of what goes on in mosque, in light of what goes on in our homes, in terms of language? Is there anyone who'd like to take this question from either teams? Is the Muhammad Basba? Go for it.
I think the whoever's posed those comments and questions have made some really good points. Yes, our identity is perhaps quite linked to our mother tongue, but let's look at what we mean when we say identity and culture and these kinds of things. By their very nature, and in fact language itself, I must add, by its very nature, it is something that changes over time. The language of the past, the culture of the past, our identity, the identity of our ancestors will be very different to the identity that we have today. The way that I identify myself as a Shia, as a Muslim, as a Brit, as someone living in this country, as someone for whom the dominant language is English, as a doctor, these kinds of things, these aspects of identity will evolve over time. And so I think whilst identity is, it's central, it's how we define ourselves, it's who we are, we must not be, I suppose, timid or scared to lose our identity because it's going to change, but rather we should embrace the fact that our identity and our language will change moving forward, and that we must do so in the way that will allow us to become the best that we can be, inshallah. There was also a second point about the mother tongue being a forum within the homes, and I think, yes, again, whoever's raised that point is a very good point. But what I say to this respective viewer is, why don't you do a poll of Wessex Jamaat and see which languages are being spoken in the homes, and then I think once again we will find out how many homes actually retain the mother tongue. Thank you.
Sister Safa, I'd like to go to you, and then maybe one more person if we have time, but then we'll have to cut it there.
I think we need to get back to this whole issue of the mother tongue. My mother tongue, as I said, it'll be difficult for me to decide. Maybe slightly English has an edge over Farsi. You ask my daughters what their mother tongue is, it's definitely English. They wouldn't even waver about it being any other language. You ask their cousins who live in Morocco, it's going to be Arabic. So saying that the mother tongue has no future is, I mean, it's like saying language has no future, is what we've said. The thing is, like Brother Muhammad Abbas said, with the changes in how language evolves and how people change, yes, I completely agree with you that identities will change. That doesn't have any bearing on how the motion is defined and what we're saying. We can completely agree with you, and that doesn't at all diminish our argument, because my daughter's mother tongue is English, and it definitely has a future. In Morocco, Arabic still has a future for God knows how much time to come. We're not specifying any particular language. If a person comes here, and like my mother, she spoke to me in Farsi because she wanted me to learn Farsi, but that might be my mother tongue, and that's great. My daughter's mother tongue is English. Somebody else's mother tongue is French. And with that does come changes in identity. And you have to embrace that. You shouldn't be afraid. And all through history, that's what happened. We are nothing like the Muslims that were at the time of the Prophet and the Ai-Imma. We're very different. Our cultures have changed. How we use language has changed. That's the whole point of our argument.
I am very, very sorry. I feel horrible putting down the hands, but please forgive me for cutting it here. Thank you so much to both the teams for bringing about these discussions. I think there's been a lot that has been discussed that is relevant now and will be relevant for our children and their children and so on. Thank you so much for engaging in the free-for-all round. We will now get back to the main debate, and Sajida Bhai, back to you.
Thank you so much. As with the debate last time, I don't think we wanted that segment to end, but we really don't want to roll into a 3-hour program today. So it's time to invite the team's final speakers to conclude the arguments. Before I invite them up here, I just want to stress again that the arguments being presented do not necessarily represent the viewpoints of the participants, and that they are for the sake of the debate only. So, Brother Muhammad Abbas, from the proposing team, please would you summarize why your team is in favor of the motion?
And your time starts now.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. A language dies every 2 weeks. With the utmost respect to our worthy opposition, even if we adopted the slightly absurd interpretation of the motion referring to the future of any language, we would still find in, let's say, 100 years that language will not resemble the language that we see today. And therefore, the language of today has no long-term future. Mother tongue and language are clearly not interchangeable terms. We're here today to discuss the lay understanding of the mother tongue, adopting a common sense approach. Over the course of the debate, my team members have presented to you a number of arguments that prove that the mother tongue has no future. We have not argued that the mother tongue has no value, nor that we should abandon it. We have simply proven that no matter which culture you belong to, the downward trajectory of the mother tongue proves that the mother tongue can have no long-term sustainable future, whether we like this or not. That which determines the future of our language is not our ancestry or heritage, but rather its present-day demand and utility. It has been made quite clear that the utility of the mother tongue is quickly being replaced with an increasing demand to excel in our dominant language or other languages of the future, based on our need for education, business, communication across cultures. The result is that the mother tongue is fading at a rapid rate, a well-researched concept known as language attrition. We looked at the example of Wessex Jamaat as a reflection of wider society to further demonstrate this shift towards a new dominant language at the expense of the mother tongue. We may choose to mourn this. We may choose to fight this, which many may consider noble. But the reality is that the fate of the mother tongue has been well and truly sealed. Our esteemed opposition have argued with admirable grace and eloquence that the mother tongue forms a strong part of our culture that brings with it many values. Though this is a valid statement independently, it does not sufficiently oppose the motion. In other words, just because there is some value in the mother tongue, this will not alter the course of its inevitable decline and extinction. But rather than choosing to mourn the loss of the mother tongue,
I suggest instead we choose to celebrate an aspect of our culture that is even more central to who we are and holds a greater level of value: the ability to embrace change and evolve for the social, physical, and spiritual betterment of our community. What do I mean by this? Some of you may have come across the recent Co-Ed Khoja Heritage Festival, which was a fantastic initiative. Those of you who tuned in or have an understanding of our heritage will know that our Khoja ancestors were Hindus and Satpants. Similarly, the Iranians amongst the community will know that their ancestors were Zoroastrian. It was because they were able to embrace change that we were guided to the path of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and for this we will be forever grateful to them. Our culture, language, and in fact our very identity evolve over time. Our duty is to evolve in a way that takes us closer towards our Islamic values, values which clearly transcend language. The Holy Quran states in Surah Ar-Rahman, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, كُلُّ مَنْ عَلَيْهَا فَانٍ وَيَبْقَى وَجْهُ رَبِّكَ ذُو الْجَلَالِ وَالْإِكْرَامِ. Everything on the earth will perish, and only the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will remain. There is an apparent meaning to this, that everything will perish except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But at another level, we can take from this that our languages may also fade. But that which gives our community longevity is the extent to which we are able to align ourselves with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, my question to you, dear viewers, my respected judges, and my esteemed opposition is, will we continue to hold on to the language of our Hindu or Zoroastrian heritage and impede our integration with society? Or will we continue the noble legacy of our ancestors in evolving as a community in accordance with the teachings of Islam to allow us to become major players on the local, national, and global scenes as a unified, multicultural Shia Ithna Ashari community? Mu'mineen, the mother tongue has no future, but our community, our culture, and our legacy, guided by Islamic values, will continue to thrive, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Brother Muhammad Abbas. So while our mother tongue may have no future, our community, culture, and legacy will continue to thrive. Is the fate of the mother tongue sealed when we look at statistics saying that one language is lost and perishes every 2 weeks? Is our fate sealed here? Is what will remain the face of Allah while everything else perishes? And actually, what we want to remain is that which leads us and has led us to the path of the Ahlul Bayt. And rather than looking at the culture and language of our ancestors, we look at the changes that they embraced to get to where we are today. Thank you so much, Brother Muhammad Abbas. I would now like to invite Sister Zahra Ismail to summarize her team's arguments. Sister Zahra, please.
And your time starts now.
Thank you very much. A few things to draw on from what you said, Muhammad Abbas. The concept you kept referring to is that we've changed the definition somewhat in the motion, that the way in which we've looked at language being, the motion discussing language as a whole is absurd. But my question to you is, what basis have you, for the definition your team has proposed? We have shown you why the mother tongue, what the mother tongue means from the Oxford Language Dictionary and the Cambridge Dictionary. We have shown that the mother tongue can be any language and is not limited to languages of our ancestors. But yet I've yet to hear from your team any source for the definition which you have proposed. So I would challenge that our definition here is absurd. Another thing that you mentioned is about languages evolving and changing and how we have to embrace this change. And you're absolutely right. No one's denying that. Evolution is not the same as languages disappearing as well. Just to remember that languages evolve. Even Zainab mentioned earlier about Chaucer and Chaucer's English. But English has still remained. It has evolved. that language is the same language gone through evolutions. And that actually, the nature of that means that evolution allows a language to continue. But still, you are right. Some languages do die. That is absolutely true. But that is why it's so critical that we go back to the definition. What will remain is still somebody's mother tongue. What remains is always going to be a mother tongue, because that is essential to who we are. We learn languages as children. A mother tongue is the first language of a child. It's just, unfortunately, common sense that we cannot understand this motion in a different way. A few other things that I want to challenge. You made a lot of reference to our community. Let's ask the question to our youth. Let's do a poll of our Jamaat. But I don't see our Jamaat in the motion as well. We've limited this debate dramatically. Even Zainab made the point earlier about how you expected us to bring the argument about communicating with the elderly. Note that we didn't. No one's denying that there is that trajectory in our community, that the elders of our community will pass and we will not have that need to communicate with them in the same way. However, we still have to acknowledge that the mother tongues, even the mother tongues of our community, Gujarati and such, have a huge prevalence in the world. We still have a global community and the ability to travel, to go different places, to see India, to see Iran, and we will still need to be able to communicate. That the way in which you've limited the discussion to our Jamaat and your understanding of the mother tongue, have you been imposing throughout the discussion different terms into the debate which are not there. And another point that was raised, which I would like to tackle from Zainab, was the mode of education being English in a lot of countries. And you're absolutely right, that is the case. But what you neglected to mention is that this is changing. There are countless number of studies which have shown that actually the mode of education is best in the mother tongue. And just to name a few, I can tell you that there's a paper by Sinas Janes 1998, Ocampo et al. 2006. I can tell you that UNESCO has suggested that the best mode of education is the mother tongue. I can tell you that the Intercultural Development Research Association has declares that maintaining a mother tongue language actually enhances academic development in the second language. I can tell you that mother tongue-based approaches to education in countless number of countries have shown better results. The Philippines, Nepal, the revival of Cantonese in Hong Kong, just to name a few. And it's really easy to understand why, because all different languages have a shared proficiency lying underneath them. And it's through establishing firmly our mother tongue, whichever that may be, that we're able to develop a second language much better. So just to draw everything together, we've heard from our team the correct way of understanding the motion. We have heard from our team the different links with language, culture, cognitive development. So unless we plan to leave our religion, leave our culture, leave our brains behind when we go to the future, I'm afraid the mother tongues are coming with us as well. Finally, Nelson Mandela has said that if you speak to a person in their mother tongue, in a language they understand, it goes to their head. But if you speak in their mother tongue, it goes to your heart. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sister Zahra. So I didn't quite catch the last bit. I was looking at the timer, but I believe that the quote you gave is that if you speak to a person in a language they understand, the message goes to their head, whereas if you speak to them in their mother tongue, it goes to their heart. Did I get that correct? Okay, thank you very much. I don't particularly want to quote Nelson Mandela wrongly. So going back to the arguments that your team has presented, or rather refuted, that evolution is not the same as a language being lost. In fact, it is evolution which allows language to continue, with the example of Chaucer that you've given, and that there are various studies. One in particular is with UNESCO, but you quoted quite a few that actually show that education is more valuable when presented in the mother tongue, and that really the mother tongue, in essence, definitely has a future. Right. So that is the debate segment concluded. I wish we could have continued, but maybe we can have a chat later when we're offline. Can I please request a loud salawat for all the participants from your homes?
Allahumma salli ala
Muhammad
wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum.
And I just want to acknowledge the especially challenging task that Sister Khadija had during the free-for-all, picking and choosing questions and trying to balance them, making sure that, you know, everybody who wanted to speak was able to have a turn. So thank you so much, Sister Khadija. I'm glad that you're in that role and not me. Now, the judges are going to go and confer. And they will be called back in around 15 to 20 minutes. And we've got some surprise guests lined up. So please settle in with your cup of chai for an interesting segment, inshallah.
Okay, so it's that time again. We would like you to vote for the second time on the basis of what you have observed during the debate. Have the speakers convinced you? Have they persuaded you? Have they changed your opinion? After listening to the arguments presented, has your opinion swayed? Join the conversation, slido.com 379748. Let us know. The poll is now open. Keep your votes coming. They will be the poll will be open for a little bit longer, and then inshallah we'll close. So the motion: this house believes the mother tongue has no future. What do you think following the debate? During the holy month of Ramadan, the Dalil class launched the Help the Hungry online food drive. It was no surprise that all of our friends and family, both Wessex and international, donated so generously. And I'm pleased to announce that the total raised was a whopping £910, mashallah. So a huge thank you to everyone for giving and giving generously. The funds will be split for the local food banks across Portsmouth and Fareham. And a special shout out to two of our students of Dalil, Mana Jafar and Kareem Huda, who are the student reps of the project. And they did a fantastic job of rising to the challenge and working incredibly hard to make this project a successful one. So for them and for the awesome outcome of this project, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. I am now going to introduce you to our surprise guest speaker. We're immensely honored to be joined by Dr. Hasnain Walji today. Born in Moshi, Tanzania, now residing in Houston, Texas, Dr. Hasnain is a researcher, speaker, and a writer involved in developing professional training and in the field of nutrition and integrative healthcare. He's the author of 26 books. That's right, you heard me, 26 books, all written from a naturopathic perspective and have been translated into several languages. If I were to list them, it'd be quite long. Dr. Hasnain's institutional work for the Muslim community spans across decades of dedication. Since 1976, he has served the World Federation of KSIMC as a Secretary General, Vice President, and then as President. He is also a founding director of the Mullah Asghar Memorial Library and Resource Center in Toronto. Dr. Hasnain is the director and producer of the documentary The Khojas, A Journey of Faith. And Dr. Hasnain is a traveler of the world, having lectured and recited majalis in English, Urdu, Gujarati, all over the world. So I imagine his plane tickets have probably accumulated quite a few points. Despite other commitments, Dr. Hasnain has very kindly agreed to join us and share with us some words of wisdom all about the Khoja heritage. We will aim to have a quick Q&A, inshallah, so please send us your questions via Slido. Dr. Hasnain, thank you so much for joining us today. Wessex Jamaat welcomes you to this stage. Everyone, virtually sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajahum.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Thank you so much, Khadija, for the kind introduction and the kind words. Indeed, it's very revealing and insightful for me, hearing our young people talking so passionately in terms of where, the future of the mother tongue or the inherited language or the vernacular or the second language, however you term it, the judges will tell us, what the results are. But I know one thing, that the future of our community is in great hands with the passion with which I heard the arguments being put for and against the motion, but it's always for the evolution and the betterment of our community. So with that said, and it has been an impassioned debate, serious debate, so I think some levity is in order. I lived in the UK for many years, and I had an opportunity to visit the Houses of Parliament one year, where I heard this joke from the Speaker of the Parliament, and I'd like to relate that because it's related somehow to the subject. He said at that time that the Westminster Borough in London was the most cosmopolitan borough of any in London at that time. It probably still is, I don't know. And in Westminster, every language was spoken in that particular borough, and every culture was represented in that borough of the city of Westminster. Now, there was a cat with 4 kittens who lived in the city of Westminster too. And when this cat was taking the kittens around, showing them the various dustbins outside the homes, saying, here is a Thai family, and if you like Thai food, this is where you'll get your leftovers, and so on and so forth. And he related the Pakistani, the Persian, the Lebanese, and all those. I don't have time to go into every language and every culture that the speaker was talking about. The bottom line was that as the cat was showing the various dustbins, saying this is the best food, depending on what your taste is, a ferocious dog approaches the cat family. And the dog barked. And and mothers are on this panel, that a mother will do anything to protect, its offspring. In her desperation, the cat actually barked back. Now, when the cat barked back at the dog has never seen or heard a cat bark, and it was totally flummoxed and ran away. Now, the mother turns to the kittens and says, see how important a second language is? That's the bottom line. That language is much more than a device for communication. We use language to communicate with others, to establish, as we heard, relationships and a sense of self, to express who we are. And it's an integral part, as was said, of us being human. The language holds an irrepressible cultural significance, our ancestral memories, our heritage, our unique knowledge and traditions. And these assets are lost the moment a language disappears. I'm neither for nor against the motion. All I'm saying is what will be lost when a language disappears. So let me share a lament of many 30-year-olds that I meet traveling Jamaats in North America and in Europe in particular, that for some, it's a loss of a potential. I quote, I could have been bilingual, wish I had kept up my Gujarati. For some, it's a loss of history. Now that my parents have passed, no one in our family can speak Kutchi now. And for some, it's a loss of identity when I hear them say that when I go to Gujarat, I feel like a foreigner. So no matter what the reasons, they all feel that they have missed out, and they're missing out on something critical to their sense of self and identity. Now, as parents, I know that we make the best choices we can for our children, and I hope that, we made the right choices. In case of heritage, of family or language, it can seem too hard to keep using them with reluctant children and too much effort for no good reason to try and maintain the vernacular. So faced with this resistance, even the most dedicated parents can lose their way and eventually shift to the majority language, as we heard. Yes, statistically, by the third generation, at least here in America, we lose the language that people came to the country with their grandparents. The first generation immigrants tend to arrive with limited English, so they continue to speak with their children in their own language, whether it's, as I said, mother tongue, heritage language, whatever it may be. The second generation grows up bilingual in their parents' language and in English, but they raise their own children, and the third generation continue to be, in most cases or in America, as English monolinguals. Our community is no exception. Whether it's English or other European languages, or even for that matter, Urdu in Pakistan, which replaces the vernacular. So question is it really worth to keep using a language that your child doesn't really need or may never use? Well, from the voices of the now adult children, yes, I say to my young friends, it is certainly worth it. You can never predict where our children may want to go in their lives. Those of us raising children with complex cultural identities cannot know where our children will eventually end up, which side or the facet of their self they'll want to live with or living. And the nomadic gene of the Khojas make it all the more possible. Most of us have traversed 4 continents in 4 generations. So now, I don't have time to go deeper into all the aspects. I'll just focus on one. In a 2011 study of the Chinese and the Korean immigrant families to see how relationships between 9th grade adolescents and their parents were impacted by a native language loss, found amongst many other things that there was a direct correlation between respect for parents and the native language fluencies. I picked this point because the study said that the honorific titles, which is a central component of respect unique to the Chinese and Korean culture, have no English alternative. They sum up the research to say not only is language integral to maintaining parental respect, but to also cultural identity. I know some arguments have been put forth and against that. I don't have time to rebut some of those, but let me say this, Gujarati is no different. The word sort of changed depending who you're addressing. Instead of the single you in the English language, those of you who understand and hopefully know Gujarati, we have tu and tame. There's a level of respect. We have saying best, sit down, and beso. It's that level of nuance. Instead of saying kya jao cho, you don't tell your elder to kya jai che. I think these are the nuances. Now, I'm not sure about the Chinese or the Koreans, but let me end this reflection on the paucity of English and the richness of Gujarati when we talk about family connections, which is all about community. There's a Khoja penchant for finding relatives. The first thing is when we get together as friends, said, taru kon saguche, kono saguche tu. The whole idea of that pension. In fact, we had a trainer, Maria Patterson, who used to do our LDP, and she said, I find this totally unique about you Khojas. This is an outside looking in, that within 5 minutes that you have met, you've already established that somehow you are related. So establishing that kinship, like you hear, and I'll say this in Gujarati and then try and translate and see how difficult it is, ke tamara fuani benni dikri mara bhaini wauche. Imagine trying to say that in English, that your father's sister's husband, sister's daughter is my brother's daughter-in-law. When you look at those nuances, that Gujarati would just says, tamare fuini benni dikri mara bhaini wauche. The idea, it's just one nuance. But, when you look at Gujarati as a language, in English, you just have grandmother. But you have nani and dadi. There is a significance in terms of the relation. The father's brother is not just uncle. He's either kaka or he's ada. Either it is kaki or motima. Or, it is not just uncle, but your mother's brother is mama, for example. Or your father's sister is your foi, and so on and so forth. So the whole idea, for example, the great-grandfather is pardada and parnana. Or when you look at the grandchildren, you have a different definition between who is a potro and potri, and doitro and doitri. It gives a relationship, and there is a deeper meaning to these relationships, something that one would miss, from the vernacular, whatever they may be. So, to conclude, the familial implication reveal that a native language allows for a more meaningful communication that can facilitate respect for these relationships as well as heritage and culture. So why study Gujarati or any other vernacular or any other world language for that matter? To reclaim a missing part of your family's history, to understand family and community events past and present. The possibilities, my young friends, are endless. Be it mother tongue or heritage language, whatever it may be, a second language is always powerful because words have power. I recently spoke to an engineer friend of mine and said, "What are you working on these days?" And he responds that I am working on aquathermal treatment of ceramics, aluminum, and steel under a constrained environment. How do you translate that in Gujarati? I dare somebody translate that. Well, I'll tell you, because of the culture and the context, it simply meant કે હું મારી પત્નીની દેખરેખ નીચે ગરમ પાણીથી વાસણો ધોતો. Meaning that I was washing dishes with hot water under my wife's supervision. That's what that meant. So I leave you with that thought. Words have power, language have influence, and be it the vernacular or be it any other language, let us try not be monolingual and attempt to be not just bilingual, but as our forefathers have shown that they were literally multilingual. So with that, I say thank you for the opportunity, and I'm glad that Khadija did not show me the 4-minute board there. Maybe she was being respectful because I know I must have gone over my time. So thank you for your patience and your respect for the elderly. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And by the way, just before I end, I would like to say particular salams to all my friends at Wessex Jamaat. I've known your Jamaat for many, many years. I visited you, and it's always been a great memory to have known you. Thank you.
Dr. Hasnain, thank you so much. I don't think I could have showed you my 4-minute card even if I wanted to. I was really roped in there. Welcome back to Wessex. It's lovely to have you, and inshallah, we hope we can have you in person at Al Mahdi Center soon. There's a couple of questions that I want to ask you on behalf of the audience, but before I go into that, I can relate to the whole doitri ni poitri jo chokro no kutro business, and I don't get it, and it just goes over my head. So I know I definitely need to work on that. Dr. Hasnain, you touched on the importance of language being retained, not just to go with the dominant language, because that might happen, but for us to retain our mother tongue. So in your opinion, what is the input required from parents in order to preserve our language and preserve our culture as such?
If I were to answer that in one word, it's persistence. It's hard. I have grandchildren, and it's hard to get them to revert to Gujarati, for example. Simply, very, very hard. But it's persistence where, yes, sometimes our children may, sort of not want, and some are in that mood, for some are in a shorter mode of dare I use the word rebellion in that respect, or in a longer mode. The idea is, number one, persistence. And number two, really, it's trying to find innovative ways to be able to articulate that. Each time there is an idiom that comes across in English, it'd be nice to say that we also mean the same thing in Gujarati, and this is how it is said. So it really is being creative and being very informal rather than imposing on our young to be able to do that. So that's number two. Being persistent, being creative, and number three, last but not the least, have some of these cultural elements within your home, be it a painting, be it a calligraphy, whatever it may be, let there be a reflection of your culture, be it in the architecture, if you can afford it, be it in your how the room is decorated. If you bring that whole ambience, take them to museums, take them to those places, and the best place that I can, and I have a vested interest in saying this, is join us for the next Khoja Heritage Tour, whenever that may be. We have had 3 phenomenal tours where people have truly enjoyed. So come by and visit the lands of your ancestors, walk the footsteps where they walked, and imagine the sacrifices that they made for us to come to the school of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam. At the same time, as a meander, because I keep saying, and I heard some arguments both ways, for the short time I was there, that culture and faith are not mutually exclusive. What the Khojas have done, and many others have, that we have actually poured our faith, the essence of the school of Ahlul Bayt, into the vessel of culture. So it has been the vessel of culture, our jamaats, our federations, our structures, which have helped us maintain that essence of our faith. Without that receptacle, perhaps the essence of the faith may have poured out. But then culture without faith is obviously a void because it has no meaning. Therefore, faith and culture are 2 wings with which any community can fly and soar, inshallah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hasnain. I think that was a beautiful analogy of us soaring through the future with culture and our language and religion, inshallah. I definitely feel that we can turn this conversation into a 3-day workshop for parents on how to bring their children and retain the culture and language. My next question is something that you've already touched on, so I won't ask it to you as a question, but I would like to read this quote for your information and for the viewers who are tuning in. So this is a quote from the late Aga Khan III, Sultan Muhammad Shah, who said, "Within 10, 20, or 30 years, the Ithna Ashari will be worn out. After 100 years, the Ithna Ashari religion will not exist at all. It will not exist in Iran either." So that's quite a long thing that's been said. This was back in 1899. That's a long, long time ago. So my question would have been, what has helped us prevail these 20, 30, 100 years? Not only have we existed, we have survived, we existed, and now, alhamdulillah, we're thriving. But thank you so, so much, Dr. Hasnain, for answering those questions. I think you already touched on that. Finally, just to wrap up, I would like to say, Anju Atsuni ne bo maja awe, inshallah, Allah panke himmat diye ke pa panja bacha ke etlo upbringing kari shage, inshallah. And for the non-Kachi speakers, I just said that may Allah give us the strength to give our children this sort of upbringing where they're not missing out on anything. I may have added 2 or 3 words in English there. But Dr. Hasnain, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Jazakallah khair, and inshallah we get to see you soon.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Jazakallah, Dr. Hasnain. Right, so poll 2 is now closed and the results will be given towards the end of the program. And now we're moving on to the final poll where you, the audience, will decide who the 2 best speakers of each team are. So please go back to slido.com and enter the code 379748. Now poll 3 is multi-select. And based on what you've witnessed today, please vote for the best speaker in each team. 1 speaker from the proposing team, which has 4 in brackets, and 1 from the opposing team, which has against in brackets. Now, the best speaker is really the one that you feel has had the most impact, whose argument was most valuable to the motion, and who held that good oratory command. So just using best speaker doesn't do the term justice. And you will be voting from 2 speakers. Sorry, you'll be voting for 2 speakers. Please make sure they are on different teams. And the 2 winners will be announced by Sheikh Fazl Abbas at the end. So we have a very special guest lined up who is very qualified to talk about his experience of bridging the gap between the Iranian and Khoja cultures. So, Uncle Hamid, please come and join us. Assalamu alaikum, Uncle.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Yes, very well. How are you?
Alhamdulillah, thank you. I was going to start. Assalamu alaikum. Kincho, bacha kinche. Now that I've perfected my Gujarati, Chakachi, Swahili, and Urdu, I learned that there might be no future for them. But I'm not worried because my mother language is Chinese. So thank you for asking me to say a few words. In my youth, to finance the hair gel I used to use, I used to work as an interpreter. And a couple of things happened, which I would like to mention, if I may, about language barrier. Once I was called by the police in Southampton to go to the police station because they said there is an Afghani that is in the cell and we want you to interpret. Now, for those of you who don't know, in Afghanistan, there are those who speak Dari, which is a dialect of Farsi, mostly Shias, and then there are those Sunnis who speak Pashto. Now, Pashto is a completely different language, and I don't understand a word of it. So when I got there, I realized that the Afghani that they have there was a Pashto. And I obviously couldn't speak a word of Pashto, but I didn't want to embarrass the police officer for his lack of knowledge of languages. So I thought I'd play along with it. So the police officer asked me to ask him why he hit that person. So I turned to the guy and I said, "Why did you hit him?" And then he said, "Me hit him first." And then I said, "I think the other guy hit him first." So this went along, and eventually they asked me to thank him, and I said, "Thank you," and that was it. One other time, I was called to go to a doctor's surgery because there was an Afghani again. But this time it was a Dari speaker. But with Dari speakers, the further they go from Iran, the stronger their dialect and the harder it is to understand. So the doctor asked me to ask him what was wrong with him. And I asked him, and he explained something in 2 minutes. And I really didn't understand a word he was saying. So I didn't want to lose face. So I said to the doctor, "I think he's got a headache." So the doctor, I think, gave him some aspirin. So I hope he's still okay. I am in awe of the amazing performance by the participants. The debate was amazing. So I just want to end by asking, if I have a disagreement with Auntie Zari, can I appoint one of you to represent me? If I can, please can you email me and I can arrange it for you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Uncle Hamid. Well, what do we get out of it? So, Uncle Hamid, we've seen the segment from the debate, and I think we've learned that if we don't maintain our language, it's really up to us, the parents, as well as the community, then we will lose so much. And you look at what Auntie Nilofer's been doing, with the Iranian community and the perseverance, as Dr. Hasnain mentioned, she has had that perseverance. So one thing I want to ask is, looking at the makeup of Wessex and assuming that if we are on the current trajectory, is Farsi going to be the dominant language of the future?
I wish it was. Unfortunately, I have been with the community for 33 years, and the only words that they taught me in these 33 years was Kencho Bachakencho. And the only thing that my wife and I have been able to teach the Khojas in these 33 years is Zerishk. One or two have started learning chola kebab, which I'm not encouraging because chola kebab is harder to make. So I don't think there's going to be a time when Iranian is going to be the dominant language. I quite like the Khoja languages. It'd be nice if Farsi was one of the languages, so I could say some things so people don't understand. I could talk about them without them understanding, but I don't think that's coming soon.
So, Uncle Hamid, you raised the point of chelo kebab. So we've been playing with a question and we can't get to the bottom of the answer. So we want to pose that question to you. What's your verdict? Chelo kebab or samosa?
Samosa and chips. I think I would go for samosa and chips.
Thank you so much, Uncle Hamid. Before we welcome the judges back, when myself, Khudeja, and Brother Muhammad Hassan Banji, were discussing this debate, one thing that really struck all of us, and we've referred to it throughout, is the diverse and unique nature of our Jamaat here in Wessex. I think there's a lot that we can learn from one another's cultures. And I think, we have actually formed over the last 33 years, as you said, a blended culture and remained unified. And we have our own blended traditions that, when you come to Wessex, there are things that you see that is so unique and very beautiful. And Khudeja, I think you had an example that you wanted to touch on quickly.
I love how on Ashura Day specifically, the signature dish is Darja Sag. But when I moved to Essex, I realized there was something else that's also the signature dish, and that's the ash. And the very first time I had it, I was like, I've never seen this dish before. This is very odd. And I was almost reluctant to have it. But then one of my friends was like, no, just try it. And I did. And since then, I love ash so much. It's now become part of our Wessex culture, hasn't it?
Yes. Yeah, thank you for saying that. Yes, ash is, it's amazing to have it. But in response to your statement, Sister Sajida, when I joined the Wessex Jamaat 33 years ago, I was in awe of the welcome that I got, and I really have been. The Khoja community has been like a family to me, and I have grown up with many. I have seen their children grow up, and it's just like it's amazing, welcoming community, and I hope it stays like that to keep our identity.
So do we, Uncle Hamid, so do we. We all know how lucky we are to be a part of this Jamaat. And, as we've touched on, our strength really is in our diversity, and we have managed to stay united. And I pray that we continue to do so and bring our own traditions that, inshallah, will pass on to the children of Wessex Jamaat. So thank you so much, Uncle Hamid, for joining us today. I hope you'll be able to continue watching on YouTube. We've got the judges coming up very shortly. So we hope that the audience, you enjoyed that discussion. Thank you for sending in your questions and comments. Now, just to let you know, poll 3 is now closed. Some of you may recall from debate 1 that this is a 3-part series. So the winning team from today will go head to head against the winning team from the first debate in a suspenseful grand finale on Saturday, the 26th of June. Inshallah, the planned time is 6:30 p.m., but please look out for communication and do make a note of the date in your diaries. And the segment that we've all been waiting for, we'd like to welcome back the judges. Judges, if you could please turn your cameras on, and participants as well, please. Just wait for everybody to come up on screen. Okay, so returning back from debate 1 is Uncle Shabir Walji. And whilst we introduced Uncle Shabir last time, there is so much more to say. Shabir Uncle's unique qualities include his extraordinary foresight and passion for empowering family and community. And Wessex is, of course, both. Back in 2013, with the inception of the current centre, Shabir Uncle and the other exec members had proposed portfolios to ensure every aspect of this community would be nurtured and every member of this Jamaat would have an opportunity to be a part of something special. And one of the proposed portfolios was actually a debating society. With Shabir Uncle and Sheikh Fazli Abbas's unwavering support and encouragement, this is inshallah finally coming to fruition.
Auntie Sabra Adori is, to put in her own words, a Jill of all trades. And I can attest that this is a very apt way to describe her. She has had a successful career spanning 20 years as a chartered electronic engineer specializing in interference technology. Wow, that's a mouthful already. After that, Sabra Auntie has spent 20 years juggling hats of funeral director, carer, educationalist. Is there anything that Sabra Auntie can't put her hand to? Of course not. Her dedication as a member of both the burial team and madrasa teacher are a testament to her nurturing nature. She seeks to serve those both in the early and last stages of their lives. So Sabra Auntie, what does the next 20 years bring? Perhaps a successful career as an author reflecting on your amazing life experiences, inshallah. Hopefully I can get your autograph and you can be like, oh, I know, Khadija, she used to be my student. Amir Nasser. Amir Nasser is a former resident and long-standing AV officer of Wessex Jamaat. In fact, his grandparents set roots in Portsmouth back in the 70s, so growing up here came naturally to him. He's now based in London and runs his own consultancy in cybersecurity and telecommunications. Amir has a very analytical mind, which comes in handy as a senior consultant working with some of the top companies in the world. Wait until you hear the list. He is an avid debater and a public speaker as he started giving speeches from the age of just 7 years old at Stanmore Jamaat. He was then a member and later the chair of the student school council at Cans Hill High School in Fareham for 5 years, as well as the pupil president in his final year. In his very limited time, he enjoys photography and volunteering. And if Amir were to star in a movie, I'd take a wild guess and say it would have to be The Matrix. After all, today he has to decide between the red pill or the blue pill. Over to you, judges.
Thank you, Khadija, for those really kind words. I also wanted to thank the organizers who have made today possible. In consultation with the other judges, we have decided to break down the next 15 minutes as follows. I will be providing feedback to the proposing team, and Sabra Auntie will be providing feedback to the opposing team, whilst Shabir Uncle will be providing feedback for the free-for-all and announce the winner of debate 2. Upon reflection, I found the proposing team had a brilliant line of argument with robust rebuttals. It was very clear that you were well-researched and versed in your arguments. I specifically liked that you worked as a cohesive team, pulling from the same methodological approach to the central argument and arguing the line together. So, to start with, looking at the participants individually, I would like to start with the first speaker. First speaker being Fatima. I really liked how you came in quite heavy and strong with relevant evidence. And you took your point all the way through from a top holistic view and then broke it down further at a micro level so we could explore it in more detail, whilst also taking us through the emotions of your point. You took us on a journey, which was amazing, so thank you. I also like how you integrated evidence into your opening statement and added those rhetorical flourishes to your remarks. However, something I wish could be worked on in the future is, as you're the first speaker, I think it would help if you more clearly laid out your roadmap so you can signpost and lead us down the route that your fellow teammates will be following. Following on to the second speaker, which was Zainab Al-Kadhimi. You started with a rebuttal, which was great, and I like how you integrated your remarks from the rebuttals all the way through your statements. All the judges commented and liked your oratory style, which was brilliant. I found your remarks a little too broad based on the motion, and I wish your points followed a slightly more logical process. Moving on to Sajjad Jafar, who was speaker 3. We all really liked your approach, and unfortunately, I couldn't mark you down on much. You came in with heavy rebuttals and directly refuted the opponent's lines of inquiry, which was brilliant, and you did that in quick succession. I like how you demonstrated the life cycle of a language and how you incorporated personal experience, which everyone can relate to. However, I wish you supplied some more evidence beyond your personal experience, which have broadened the reach of your argument. Moving on to Muhammad Abbas, who was speaker 4. Your oratory skills, Muhammad Abbas, are something else. Your tone control and the way you delivered your remarks was phenomenal. I found your address also very inspirational. However, the role of the 4th speaker is primarily to summarize the role, which you did very well, but it's also to refute and rebut the opposing side's arguments in your closing statement. I wish you had spent a bit more time refuting the opposing side, just so it would have made your overall argument a lot more well-rounded. I think all the speakers today, though, have performed extremely well. And during the debate, I have been truly engaged and entertained by every speaker. So thank you. It has been a pleasure and honor to be a part of this debate.
Thank you. We would now like to hear from one of the judges from the other team. Sabira Auntie, I can't quite hear you. Nope, nothing. Is that the same for everyone else, or is this just me?
Apologies, I can't hear Sabira Auntie either.
Okay, maybe Sabira Auntie, try unplugging the headset.
Is that better?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect, thank you.
Thank you. A bit of technology, I can handle it. So, Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and thank you very much for being here, for giving us your views, for sharing your views with our audience. Thank you, audience, for being here. I'm going to be necessarily brief, unfortunately, because time is marching on. And although normally for Ramadan we would like the days to be shorter, this is one occasion where we would like the day to extend, but not our choices. So everyone spoke well, everyone spoke passionately, everyone feels for the slow fading and extinction as the team for the motion explained. But the against team came up with a swift, strong, passionate, I would say even argument. And I will dive straight into the first speaker, Mossadegh Damji. I was so impressed with the classical research that you had done for a very broad audience. So you were not speaking to people who already have a knowledge of 2 languages. And I think that theme continued through to the other speakers as well. So it was a good team cohesive approach in that sense. And also I liked that you had signposted the flow for the rest of the team members as well. And that held for me at least. As a wish, there was a lot of passion from all the against team, and I was a bit concerned that might take away from the clarity of the actual oratory. So what I would like is for you to engage with clarity, more sort of objectively, like your research was very objective and broad. It just could come across more objectively. Safa, moving on to Safa, you engaged passionately and you spoke, especially at the free-for-all, and you have a wealth of experience with different languages, and as we see, different cultures. And we made the distinction throughout the debate between the 2, but also how they tied up. you had researched exceedingly well the Quran. Those ayats were coming out as a stream. It wasn't just a stream; it was a welling, a river of ayats. So the breadth was there, but perhaps I would have enjoyed the depth of each ayat more, or perhaps fewer ayats, but with more depth, so that the arguments could be tied together better. Rather than sort of I have also found this other literature. So to tie it in with the argument. Mohammed Taki, is that right? Mohammed Taki? Oh, could somebody plug me in, please? You made good eye contact. Your rebuttal was direct. I can't read my writing now. Oh yes, it was directly linked to the central argument. So that was excellent work. And your animation was excellent. But I felt maybe you could develop your confidence in approaching a broader, having a broader outlook, so talking to a broader audience, so being more aware of who your audience is, and not limiting it to, for example, this YouTube might be seen by other people who don't come from the same cultural background. So I think that would help you generally in life as well. Zahra, we all agreed that you were passionate, you were very clear. Secretly, we thought you beat Muhammad Abbas. But for the sake of this debate, we shall say that you had very good rebuttal, supported by excellent research and plentiful of it. You focused well on the definitions of mother tongue, which throughout the debate were changing from for and against speakers, and even within the against team. Within the for team. The against team held fast to what the signposting that Musaddiq had done. So basically you did a good summing up of both teams' views and both sets of points raised. And that was excellent. It was an excellent person to end the fantastic debate with. And it was a really, really lovely, enjoyable evening. So thank you all very much. You all did exceedingly well. Bless you all. And I'll hand over, I think, now to Shabir Uncle, please.
Assalamu alaikum, my dear speakers, the audience, and the moderators, and my court judges. MashaAllah. It's been it's amazing how fast time flies when you are actually listening to very passionate and articulated arguments in this sensational debate that we have all enjoyed this afternoon. I, without much ado, will first announce the results. And MashaAllah, the motion that said that the mother tongue has no future has won with 314 points scored, as opposed to the motion against. The score was 288. So the winning team had 26, exceeded by 26 points. And I congratulate you all, and that the mother tongue has no future. Okay, so this proves that possibly it has no future, and much more debate. More debates need to be held in different aspects, because we cannot do justice in one evening on such an important topic, which has considerable profundity, and it does need to be discussed more in depth. because the language, the means of communicating, the means of salvation, the means of structuring one's life, or the influence that each one of you tried to convince us, it really begins in the mother's womb. I heard a lot about the mother's sickness, the morning sickness, sorry, beg your pardon, but no one talked about the thought process which commences as soon as the embryo is formed in the mother's womb. And I don't know which language would you be talking to the child at that stage in the development of the embryo. However, I would suggest that we stop at that, and I would recite 3 salawats for all the speakers, really. They were amazing, I must say. They were amazing. It was hard, but the results, and we did spend a lot of time, and we never conferred, in the sense, never influenced each other, and the impartiality was amazing. Okay, so that's where we are. So 3 salawats, please, for the winning team and all the speakers. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala Muhammad. I'm truly honored. Thank you so much. And mashallah, Khadija and Sajida, you've done an amazing job in organizing this debate, and it takes a lot to reach at this point. May I wish you all the very best in the future, inshallah. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Uncle Shabir, Sabira Auntie, and Amir. I know it wasn't an easy task, and I want to just reiterate what Shabir Uncle said, that, a huge congratulations, not only to the winning team, but, both teams for your hard work. Now we have the results from poll 2, and they say that having tuned into the debate, do you think the mother tongue has a future? So initially, poll 1 showed that 85% of our audience thought the mother tongue did have a future, or does have a future, and that has now shifted slightly to 70%. So I think that is the work of the proposers. But really, congratulations to both teams for a truly show-stopping performance. Couple of people I would like to mention before we hand over to Sheikh Fazl Abbas. So I'm pretty sure Khadija touched on it earlier, but our amazing tech support team, the participants, and Brother Muhammad Hassan Banji, who wasn't with us today, but has, been an organizer with myself and Khadija, but also a judge and coached the judges. So, we really miss him here today, but we're hoping he can catch the debate on YouTube. Also, when we spoke about Sabira Auntie being on the, burial committee, I would also like to reiterate, or actually, sorry, I never brought it up, but we can't mention that without mentioning our other partner in crime, which of course is Uncle Hamid, who we saw earlier, and really he served the people of this Jamaat both during their life and during their death. And I wonder if that's what gives him his unique sense of humor. And I would now like to pass on to Sheikh Fazl Abbas to say a few words and share the results of the best speaker poll.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Dear Mu'mineen, today the temperature was being forecast to be 17 degrees by the Portsmouth weather forecasters. But as I have been sitting in my office over here and following the debate, I just noticed that the temperature has really shot high. The mercury has gone high. And then I tried to understand what is it that is happening. It's none other than the presenters, both from the proposing side and the opposing side, who have really raised the temperature. So, Mu'mineen, I must say that this afternoon, you have indeed given us a very high standard of presentation. The points which you put, both for the motion and against the motion, were really indeed thought-provoking to such an extent that we can see and relate them to our own personal lives and bringing it down to the needs of our Wessex Jamaat community as such. So for all these which you have put in your time to be able to prepare and be able to present this in the community over here, I would like to express heartiest appreciation and commendation for very diligently being able to put up this wonderful presentation and raising up the temperature. What I ask you now is, do not lower this temperature. Please try your best to continue increasing this temperature of conversation within the community. Why do I say that? I say that bearing in mind that you as participants had no choice as to which part of the house you are going to support the motion as such. The views which you presented were basically your own way of being able to see that you achieve or score the highest points as such. But however, the reflection points which are given, especially by Murabbi Hasnain Walji, and together with the very nice subtle messages given by Brother Hamid Sami, are points which we need to take forward for maintaining the temperature for discussion. For we as a Wessex Jamaat, we have young community. Our demography shows us that we have parents who are young in that age as such, and many a times in our intention of getting the best for our children, we perhaps might not be looking at the blind spots in getting the best for our children as such. So within this time, with the true reflection given by Haji Hasnain by Walji over the period of generations, over 3 generations, with evidence, for those young parents in the other side of the pond, wishing that they would have been able to communicate, is a message for us to reflect. So I would urge you, please keep on the temperature for conversation and discussion. And the other point is for us to think about it, that the way Hasnain Bhai said, that with the language comes with it its own values of tahzib and adab. And bear in mind, it's not specific with Gujarati, but I can personally tell you that being a speaker of Arabic, being a speaker of Farsi, and being a speaker also of Kiswahili and Gujarati and Kutchi, I can tell you that the tahzib which these other languages are able to give to us can never be able to be brought about into the language of our communication in our interaction with the English language today as such. So inshallah, having given these few points for reflection, I would now like to also acknowledge appreciation to the 3 judges led by Shabir by Walji, Sabira by Nancy, and my dear young brother Amir Nasser. Thank you very much. I mentioned last time also, I do not envy the position in which you are being there. Thank you very much. Please accept this a deep message of gratitude from the depth of my heart with the way you have really focused in being able to educate in this debate and at the same time in being able to give them that wonderful feedback. On the lighter note, Amir, you really spoke well about Muhammad Abbas Jafar, giving him that feedback, especially regarding oratory, but I can tell you, he is more than what you saw him today. It's just that Iman raktu to kananke eni ben Zahra by Same not much enalide. Muhammad Abbas, this I was mentioning to you. Get somebody to translate this in English or Kutchi or Kiswahili for you. What I mentioned was that Muhammad Abbas definitely is more turbocharged than what you saw him today. The only reason he did not show you his real performance is because out of respect for his sibling Zahra on the opposite team as such. So that's just a lighter note to try and practice my Gujarati for today. So thank you very much, the judges. My du'as are there, inshallah, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards you for having taken this very challenging task, inshallah, with increased barakah and with a lot of success in your various endeavors, inshallah. To all the participants on both sides of the house, Jazakumullah khair, inshallah. For you and your families, inshallah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant you great barakah, inshallah. And please do continue keeping up the heat for this conversation within our community at Wessex Jamaat, inshallah. Congratulations for the team which has won today's debate, and that is the one which was supporting the motion as to this house believes that the mother tongue has no future. So please get in some more of the koraki, the more of the food, and prepare yourselves for the knockout in the final round, inshallah. Wishing you all the best and success over there. Now it gives me great pleasure to be able to now announce the results of the best speaker according to the poll over here. And as Sajida Bai mentioned, that the best speaker to be able to get a better meaning was for you, the audience, to poll as the speaker who was most impactful in that team with regards to the motion as such. So it gives me great pleasure to announce that on the proposing team with the best speaker that has been polled is Fatima Bai Hamir. And on the opposing team, the audience have polled in majority to propose the name of the best speaker on the opposing team to be Zahra Bai Jafar Ismail. Congratulations to Fatima Bai Hamir and Zahra Bai Jafar Ismail. Wonderful, keep it up. And finally, last but not least, Sajida Bai, Muhammad Hassan Banji, and Khudeja. તમે બહુ જ સારું કામ કરી રહ્યા છો, બહુ જ મહેનત કરી રહ્યા છો. You indeed are doing a wonderful job. You are putting in a lot of efforts into this thing. અને ખરેખર આ જે છે ઈશારો છે કે કોમની હમદર્દી તમારા દિલોના અંદર કેટલું બધું અંદર છે. And truly this is an indication of the amount of devotion and loyalty which you have towards the community. In Baraya Shuma, kheli khob has. This for you is very good. Na mimi ninawaeleza kwamba endeleeni kufanya hivyo hivyo kuhudumia jamii ya vijana, inshallah. And I am advising you, continue putting in efforts towards service for the community, for this is what is preparing for the ummah of Imam of our time, Sahib al-Asri wal-Zaman. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma
salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
We have about 4 minutes until Salat time, 3.5. So if you want to stay on just for 2 minutes to greet one another, please do. And then Salat time is at 9:15 p.m. in Ports in Ferrum.
Are we offline?
I'll let you